All right, there it is. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Steve Emerson. I'm the principal at Olson Middle School in Minneapolis, as Carly mentioned, Minneapolis. And my team and I are so excited to be here to be able to share our story with you. It's been an amazing journey, and as it will take you from the beginning through the context, through the pandemic, and where we are now. But first, I'd like to introduce our team. If you go to the next slide, please. Whoops, I missed one thing. Yeah, let's go to that one, then we'll come back to that one. Let's go to the introduction slide, Carly, the next one, okay, and then we'll come back. First of all, this is who we are. I'm the principal. We have our instructional specialist and my story, my Brilliance project coordinator, Stacy Marshall, one of our counselors, Anita Malari, and a teacher leader who was kind of the brains behind this whole thing, if he doesn't mind me giving him credit for that, Jeff Wendelberger. Okay, now if we go back one. As you join our group today, we want you to think about this quote that you see on this page. And as you're looking at the quote, please share in the chat who you are and what you do and where you're from, so that we kind of get an idea as to who is in the room with us. We'll just take a minute or so to do that. And as you're doing that, I think I'll read the quote. You are more important than the systems we serve. You are more important than my personal preferences. You are more important than the way the content is packaged. I'm willing to learn about you to help you reach your life goals. And I can't see the last one because there's something flashing on the screen.
I will honor you with instruction that holds you accountable and empowers you to take ownership of your own learning.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. If we go to the next one and then the next one. All right. So we are educators at an urban middle school in Minneapolis. We have about 400 students. Over 90% of our students receive free and reduced lunch. Over 90% of our students are students of color. 1/4 of our students receive special education services. About 10% of our students are homeless and highly mobile. About 10% of our students are English language learners. We have about 8% advanced learners, and almost 3/4 of our students come to us below grade level in math and reading. So a few years ago, Jeff and I and my assistant principal at the time, we were trying to figure out ways to better serve our students so that they could get what they need to be to excel, to really show their true brilliance. And we knew for sure that our students are as intelligent as any students anywhere. These standardized test scores were showing people something different than what we were seeing in person with our students. And we needed our students to see themselves reflected in classrooms. And so we focused on a project called My Story, My Brilliance, which centers on the questions around student identity: where am I from, who am I now, and who am I becoming? I mean, in the comment Jeff inserted below, we're just a public middle school with all the constraints and baggage that come with the territory, but we realize the solutions must come from us and our community.
Thanks, Ethan. So yeah, and I'll pick up on that, and I really like to pick up on that quote and start from that, because that really was our important launching point, where, for a realization. I mean, as anyone in public education, for even a minute, you realize that the system is not set up for all students to succeed, and in fact, it's set up to marginalize and to create inequities. And we realized that, and we realized it was five or so years ago when we said we really have to make substantial changes that are within our power to do this. And there's so many constraints in the public education system that we really had to sort through what can we do, what's in our immediate locus of control, and what kinds of things do we have to hold off from this system. And that's really where My Story, My Brilliance started. And we'll talk about the aspects of My Story, My Brilliance. But of course, 2 years into this pilot program, the program that we were running to really transform our school, the pandemics hits, and so everything shifts to distance learning, and everything is disrupted, as we all know, for everybody. And as we reflected back, we thought about, kind of one of the themes of this conference is, how do we heal from this? How do we move on? How do we take the lessons learned? And we thought about how fortunate we were that we had already begun and created a lot of the infrastructure of systems that were really better for kids, and how that helped us so much to be supportive in our community as things started to happen that became added trauma to trauma to trauma for our kids. Um, and one of the things that we keep in mind throughout throughout the project and our daily work with kids is, we're really trying to change the moment to moment experience of our students. There's absolutely no reason why school cannot be the most joyous part of every student's day. It should be. Every child should love to be at school and come to school. And so we're looking for that moment to moment experience, and really to affirm and honor our kids' stories. We know that our kids come from cultures that are as legitimate and wonderful, and histories and experiences that are as amazing as any that anybody has, but they've been delegitimized by the system over and over again. And so one of the big themes that we have is really prioritizing student need fulfillment over the institutional need. And that was really part of that quote that we started with. This is about creating places for human beings, not supporting institutions and systems. So that's a big overriding piece for us that we started about 3 years ago now. You can go to the next slide, and it's just to give a little bit of context about My Story, My Brilliance, which, as I said, we had started when the pandemic hit. But then these new traumas came, and then they came right after another for our community in particular. And one of them was, we have a significant population of students who come from Asian heritage. And so immediately there started to be some hate speech and things that started to build the trauma for that particular group of students. As we were working our way through the pandemic and just starting to negotiate what that meant, George Floyd was murdered just a few miles from our school, and that dramatically impacted our community, and the trial and what happened after that was a huge impact on the community. And then on top of that trauma, uh, Dante Wright was killed literally at the doorstep, almost at the doorstep of our school. And there was a direct tie to our school community in that family. And so this was trauma upon trauma upon trauma upon historical trauma. And that was the context. And uh, for really the start of what we're going to talk about. And as I said before, we were really, really fortunate that we had already developed tools through My Story, My Brilliance that began to meet students' needs, so that we were able to support them, and we're continuing to evolve and develop that. And you can go to the next slide, Carly. And so at this point, we just set up some of the contexts for where we are, and how we kind of think about this a little bit. And we'll talk more about the specifics of the project, but we wanted to just give people a chance to raise any questions or make any comments that you would have at this point. You can put them in the chat or just jump right in.
All right, looks like nothing yet, Mr. W. So let's press on and see what questions come up. We want to invite people to raise hand, type in questions at any point that you would like to know more or have some clarification around something.
All right, thanks, Carly. You can jump to the next one. And so we'll talk more about specifically about what we've done and how we've modeled our transformational project here at Olson. And really, we're going to talk specifically about how the systems that we had put in place and things that we were already doing really helped to provide a place for the community, our school community, to find some healing and find a lot of support. Of course, the school can't do everything for the kinds of issues that we have in the community right now, but we feel like we've been a real strong support for our kids. And one of the things that My Story, My Brilliance is really meant to, as we said, provide a transformational experience for students and really create equity and joy. Joy is a huge part of what we do. The expectation that we bring joy and that we have joy and we experience joy. And of course, that has been really tested in the days that we have, but we need to be a refuge for our kids as much as possible. And one of there are several main levers that we've used to build it to bring this about. And one of the big ones has been building the teacher collective efficacy and competency. And we'll get to that, how important it is that, you know, as the teachers are the people who are having those moment-to-moment experiences with kids, and teachers really need to know how do you make those moments need fulfilling. So those are sort of the big bucket pieces of My Story, My Brilliance. And you can go ahead, Carly. And these are the things that really happened for us. We about 3 years ago, we wrote a grant from the Phillips Foundation to provide us with a considerable amount of money, and we used that money to bring in counselors for all of our teams. And we're going to talk about that because that was a huge part of what has transformed the experience for kids in our school. We also brought in Stacy Marshall, who was coordinating the project, and that allowed us to do professional development around My Story, My Brilliance, and to bring reflective journaling as a school-wide practice. And we're going to talk specifically about each of those things and the impact that they've had. And we're going to start with reflective journaling across the school. I'm going to
and Mr. W, if I could jump in before we move ahead to that, I just want to make a comment on the partnership. One thing that Jeff mentioned earlier was about how the institution, the system doesn't set itself up to do what we needed it to do for our kids. And so we really looked to a partnership outside of our school district in order to be able to get the resources to make sure that we could fund this project and get this project moving to a place where we'll eventually be able to fund it ourselves. And that was partnership through the Phillips Foundation, but also I want to tip my hat to Education Evolving for supporting us through this project as well, because they really helped open our eyes to see what other schools around the United States are able to do and have been able to do. And that's where we've done some replicating. So.
Okay, pass to Mike. Hi everyone, I'm Stacy Marshall and I'm the MSMB coordinator, or My Story, My Brilliance coordinator at Olson. I'm going to talk a little bit about journaling today. I would say that we all think that journaling is really at the heart of MSMB. Our grade level teams journal with our students every 1 to 2 weeks. And we rotate the journaling among the teachers on the team so that students can really see that journaling takes place in every class, that it's school-wide, that you can journal in math class, you can journal in science class. And we rotate that so that students see it's a school-wide initiative. Before the pandemic, journaling looked a lot different. So on the left there, you see a student. We would provide students with those composition notebooks, and we'd take a couple days in class and cut out magazine clippings or print out pictures of student interests and goals and different things that they like, foods, anything, sports, role models, and students will decorate their journals with clippings and glue them on and really personalize their journals. But since the pandemic, we weren't able to do that this year. So we moved to an online program. On the right there, you see it's called Wixie. And some of you may be familiar with Wixie. But there's a journal template in Wixie, which allows students to do very much the same thing. Go in, decorate the covers, and personalize their journal. So we did that with students at the beginning of the year. And then add pages, and then every 1 to 2 weeks, teachers and counselors provide students with the prompts, and students have been coming up with prompts themselves as well. You can go ahead and change the slide. Feel free to jump in wherever, Anita, as well. The journaling prompts, like I said, are generated by teachers, students, and counselors, and they really reflect current events, some social emotional learning, some relationship building among students and staff, and then classroom curriculum can also be represented in the prompts. If you see the prompt that's on the right there, this is an example prompt that we used this year after Amanda Gorman, a Black poet, performed at the Super Bowl, and then she really talked about the front lines, the people who were on the front lines of the pandemic, the captains, she called them, who work every day to keep us safe. And so we asked students, who is a captain in your life who has been there for you during difficult times, what they appreciate about how they've helped them, and what is a way that they might honor them. So that's just one example of a prompt that we might give. Every week, there's 1 to 4 prompts, and students can pick from the prompts to respond to. Number 4 is always write about what's on your mind. So students can always just write what they're thinking about. They can draw pictures, but we find out a lot about our students through the journaling. Some students respond to all 4 prompts, which is great every week. After the students are done journaling.
Sorry, Ms. Marshall.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in really quick?
Yeah, please.
Because one of the things that I think that we really found that was wonderful for us was that because we had already had the journaling in place, we've been doing it for 2 years. When we switched to distance learning, it was we just had to come up with a platform, but it was already there, and where certainly distance learning was disruptive and a struggle for us, as it was for everyone, I think. But this was one of the places that it just offered this real natural opportunity for us to continue to get to know our kids. And this year, when we started in distance learning, we had a whole group of kids that we've never met before. And the fact that we just introduced them to the journaling just made this really nice natural bridge, so that when everyone else was kind of struggling with teachers looking at just the squares on Google Classroom because people wouldn't turn their cameras on and things, and it was a really difficult environment to get to know kids, this became the lifeline for us in distance learning. And it's just so fortuitous that we had already started it and developed it when the distance learning time hit. And so this is definitely one of the things that we really accelerated our perfection of how to use this for kids.
One of the other things to notice about this, Stacy's talking about teacher teams, and they're interdisciplinary teams. So the journal writing is supported and owned by all teachers on the team, and all teachers on the team are part of the response to the journals as well. So one of the things that makes this different than if you were an English teacher like I used to be, you might have students write in journals and read and respond, but it's really just between you and the kids. This is among the whole teaching team and the counselor as well. So I'll turn it back over to Stacy.
Yeah, thank you both for jumping in. Like Jeff said, many of our teachers talk about how when their students did show up in person this year, some of them, they felt like they already knew them because of the journaling and being able to see what's really going on in our students' lives. There's another prompt here. How would you define discrimination? What are you doing to take care of yourself and your family during the pandemic? We gave examples for students to pick from, or we, many times students have just all different kinds of examples. On the right, you'll see after students are done journaling, our counselors and teachers sit down and read student journals every week and respond. There's a place where on Wixie where you could respond to students and ask them questions, have them go deeper. You know, it's really a way too that when students respond in journals, we might notice that students might be having trouble with friends, or they might be having trouble at home. And so if a student writes about being in trouble or needing extra support, we're able to alert the counselors right away and flag a student to say, like, can you check in with the student immediately? Because this is what we read in the journal. And it's a great way too for teams to know what's going on with students because we read journals collectively as a team. So if we see something in a journal like, oh, this student really likes this, the whole team knows right away, and we can actually use that in the classroom, in the curriculum, to engage students when we know what they're interested in. And like I said, the counselors are instrumental in this, you know, just being there for support and also being able to check in with students right away. So I will turn that over to Ms. Malari, one of our awesome middle school counselors at Olson.
So a big part of our journaling is it's a culture at Olson. Journaling is part of our MSMB culture, and that's something that we say when our 5th graders are coming into the school, that journaling is going to become a part of your daily routine. And it's a way for students and teachers to connect. So if students say, oh, I don't want to tell you my business, you know, this is my life. And it's about saying, hey, you know, we can give you your own journal that you can take home and you can keep it with you and you can write anything you want in it. This one is so that we can bring your voice into the school. And we want, you know, if you, I'm trying to think of, like, if there's some science experiment you saw on TikTok. So kids are on TikTok, you know, and they're seeing all these really great things. If there's a science experiment on TikTok you want to try in the science classroom, you can journal about it. And maybe we as a grade can actually bring that into our grade level curriculum. And it's really about bringing that student voice into being in the classroom. So this has been really great during the pandemic, having like these incoming students who we don't know. Teachers also provide an example prompt. So it's not just students being vulnerable, it's also teachers sharing a little bit about themselves, and then students feel a little more comfortable too. All right, we can go to the next slide.
And yeah, and Ms. Malari, before we got Alex and a question, and Lars has a comment in the chat. But before we go, I just wanted to talk a little bit about just the history of where journaling came from. And you know, originally what we originally saw out of research out of Stanford, that said that when you give students who are marginalized, whose culture has been marginalized from school, when you give them the opportunity to express their values and their feelings, you're going to raise their experience. You're going to make their experience better, but you're also going to raise their engagement and their grades. And then we went on the trip to Boston. Steve went on the trip to Boston and saw this really well developed at a school in Boston, a curriculum called Know Thyself. And so we picked it up and we worked with it and made it into our own, and we continue to make it into our own. And now a really fortuitous thing that has happened is one of the high school that we feed into, most of our kids go to, is the principal of that high school has his children at Olson. And so his children started experiencing the journaling and the writing that comes out of this and the value of this. And now we've begun to develop, because he's super enthusiastic about moving this up into the high school, because he says, oh my gosh, whatever you're doing that's creating all this writing and engagement for our kids, it's amazing. My kids love it. And we should continue it at Henry High School where he is. So it's really been a fortuitous track.
Yeah, the school actually that I visited in Boston was called On Course to College High School. And it was the curriculum Know Thyself was a high school curriculum that the high school English teacher created. And we actually brought him to our school to do some professional development with our teachers around how it looked for the high school students and ideas for how we could adapt for middle school students. And so it was pretty exciting to be able to not only go out there and see him in action and see what he did, but also to have him come to our school and work with our teachers around this.
Alex, you had a hand up.
Yeah, thanks. This is so fun to hear about. I'm curious as I hear about the process in establishing that practice of journaling. I imagine that there's also a lot of trust that has to be built there to get students to be willing to and to be comfortable sharing with that journaling, and especially as you had those new students at the beginning of this year. I'm curious if you can talk about like how you both build that trust, but also encourage students that, how you balance that confidentiality and also that knowledge that you are going to be responsive to what students are writing, and how, yeah.
I could speak to that. So that's a great question, because we do have a lot of students. It even takes them maybe half a year to build that trust. Some students don't even like writing. So what we've come up with is having students be able to express themselves in their own way, and also include other abilities. So for those who don't feel comfortable writing or cannot write, we have like a text-to-speech option. You can post pictures in it. And we start with low-risk prompts at the beginning of the school year. So it could be like, tell us about your pets, or, if you could go anywhere in the world, where would it be and why? And the pet question is like, I think we get the most journal responses to that, because we have so many students who, if they don't have a pet, they put pictures of all the different pets they would want. And that, like, by starting with those low risk prompts, we then start increasing the riskiness of it. And we always make sure that we have multiple prompt options. The last one is always write about whatever is on your mind. So it could be about a bee they saw that landed on their nose. I don't know, like, something just totally random that maybe they didn't, like none of the prompts resonated with them, so they can write about something else. And that starts to, once they write about that and then the teachers respond to it, they get this sense of like, wow, my teacher saw my journal entry, they responded to it. I'm like, this is exciting. Let me try a little bit more. And that's kind of how we've gotten to that point.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, and I'll just add too, just a little bit to that, is we have a series of slides that we go through with the students before every journaling session that kind of go through the why of journaling. Why are we doing this? We also talk a little bit about, how journaling can help you in your life. And then also, just remember always that if you do post something or journal about something that talks about that you're in trouble or someone else is in trouble, we're obligated to let someone know, so that students know that every time we journal, just so they can't say you never told us. They always know that that's there. And then this year we've been able, with distance learning, to use breakout rooms as well. So Anita and I will jump in on journaling days with teachers, and we're available to be in breakout rooms to help students kind of brainstorm what to write about if they're having like a mind block that day, or just not really sure. It really helps. We've found out a lot about students that way as well, just like, oh, I love reading these books, or I'm an anime fan, or whatever it is, what sports figures they like. So
yeah, and I would just add that it was really, we talk about how so much of this comes from the teachers and the school and the community. We're going to have to solve whatever issues that are brought to us. There's no help from the outside world that's going to come in and make this a wonderful community. And journaling was really a great example of how that it comes into action, because the first year that we tried journaling, it was very difficult. It was difficult, for the exact reasons. Students wouldn't trust us. And that says something about the school system, the longer you're in it, the less you trust the teachers in the system. What a wonderful indictment. And so we knew, so, journaling was one way that the adults come face to face with that. And there's no avoiding it. We have to get the kids to trust us and participate. And so we really worked on it. And it took us that second and third year. And I know Miss Malari and Miss Marshall were really instrumental in saying, let's have the teachers and the adults actually write and share their responses to these prompts and talk through it. And now they're super vulnerable. That was huge. And then the ways that we experimented with having kids give input to the prompts so that they feel like, okay, they are in control of part of this. And it just made just a tremendous difference from year 1 to year 3 based on what the adults and the children really did to make it work.
I have a question as well, and it's not letting me raise my hand because I'm the host, so I'm just going to jump in if that's okay. But you mentioned earlier that joy is a central component to your school and your community, and we know that this year has been just incredibly difficult for students and educators. So I'm wondering how you make that joy piece intentional and a practice for your students and for your educators, or how you want to grow in that.
That is a great question, and it's really hard right now to do it unless you're intentional. In fact, it's not going to happen unless you're intentional and very aware of it, and it's hard during a normal time. One of the things that we'll talk about later is an instructional routine that we've developed for kids that we teach our staff and it includes celebration in it. So the expectation for the staff is, and this is what we teach them, is that on every interaction you have with kids, your goal is to, we call it GIFSI is the acronym, and your goal is to incorporate some goal or interest that they have in that interaction. Your goal is to convey a high expectation to them for their success, give them high support, provide them with feedback because it drives learning. And then the last one is celebration in the GIFSI acronym. And so built into everything we want our teachers to do is celebrate. It's a moment-to-moment thing. And so we sort of, we're taking that, and it's really one of the hardest ones to develop. But with that intentional focus on it, we take it and we begin to celebrate. And we'll talk in a minute here about some of the celebrations that we have built in that are like official celebrations. But it's those moment-to-moment ones that really make a culture and a life that we work on. And we're making progress on that.
I'll just add too that we know this has been a tough year for kids, and when we notice with journaling at least that it's just been a heavy time for kids or something like that, we will definitely put in a lighthearted journal prompt. I think this week we had design your own Dairy Queen blizzard as one of the prompts, or just a few weeks back it was tell us about your happy place. So we really try to put some of those prompts in there just to kind of bring some fun into the journaling as well. So that's not always a really heavy topic, but we do put those heavy topics in once in a while because we learn a lot about our kids that way.
I mean, totally, you have to, you can't ignore those things. That's really beautiful. I love that celebration piece.
So if there's no more questions or comments on that, we'll move into what I think is the most powerful piece of My Story, My Brilliance, and that's bringing the counselors in, really reimagining the role of school counselors in a school and bringing them in as full-fledged members of a teaching team. Ms. Malari, take that away.
I saw Alex's comment. Eventually, at one point, the students started putting in what are the most disgusting blizzard ice cream ideas. It was so funny. They were like, oh, I'm going to put pickles in here and mustard with vanilla ice cream. And it was just so funny because it just got the kids to interact with one another in person, and even in distance learning, they don't get a lot of time to interact, chances to do that. So yeah, it was a DIY DQ blizzard. So yeah, school counselor, like, so my pronouns are she, her. My name is Anita Malari. And if, for those not familiar with the school counselor's role, school counselors are the new and improved guidance counselor role. So to be a school counselor, you have to have a master's in school counseling, and you go over, our role is to do a lot of college career readiness, social emotional skills, like transitions to middle school, life transitions, future transitions, you name it. So something that's really unique about Olson and that the MSMB grant has allowed us to do is have one counselor per grade level. And our ratio is like one counselor to 150 students. And that, I mean, we know every single one of our kids, and that's so important that we get to be allies for our students and also for our teachers, and then build, like, you know, build the bridge and get everyone to be a community. And it makes it sound like one big happy family. It takes time to get there, and we've gotten there. You know, it took a long time during distance learning to have students build the trust. Usually there are these little M&Ms you see on Google Meet of just initials. They don't speak, they don't, you don't know that they're there. But eventually we started seeing students typing in the chat. We'll start playing some games that gets them excited about being there. And a lot of that has to do with teachers and counselors working together to build a mental health support bridge that allows students to feel comfortable. So we can go to the next slide. So I already talked about the counselor per grade level team, which is just amazing. Something that a lot of counselors have to do in the nation is scheduling, testing. They have to have like lunch duty where they actually have to supervise instead of just being able to build relationships with students. We don't have to do any of that. We just get to focus on building relationships with students and teachers and being there for our kids. So something that was different during this pandemic time is our transitioning. Elementary students coming, 5th grade students coming to Olson, our middle school students going to high school, and they're scared. You know, they are 4th grade, for some students, 4th grade was the last time they were at school, and they had their whole 5th grade year during distance learning. So essentially they're going from being in 4th grade in-person school to 6th grade in-person school next year. So we developed a way to have a virtual transition for students and help them feel a little more comfortable. We gave a virtual tour, and our 8th grade counselor is doing something similar to that. And it's been great to be able to provide that support in a virtual way too. So there are some things that we learned during distance learning that we may not have otherwise learned if there was never distance learning. And a big part is Google Hangouts. So I'm curious if you've heard of Google Hangouts, let us know in the chat, because that has become almost a school-wide thing that we use. It's hangouts.google.com, and we are able to communicate like a chat feature with our teachers, with our students. We have a group chat which has all our teachers in it, and we're able to better keep in touch like ever before. Well, I can't imagine not having that feature anymore after we're just permanently back in person. And another one is the daily check-in Google form. So I created a daily check-in form that has a question of the day. So it's just a way to get students talking to one another in their advisory class. Today, the question was, who's your favorite villain? Another social emotional question might be, when you're feeling angry, what are some ways that you try to cope with that? So there are a variety of questions so that we can get to know each other better. It starts a great discussion in the classroom. And on the left, you see like it's like a scale. So I'm ready to learn. I'm not feeling really great today. I'm kind of stressed out. I'm feeling fine. And the students get to check an emoji or a Bitmoji that all our teachers have created. And they also get to let me know if they want to check in with me that day. The teachers also have access to this, so they can see right at 9:30 when students are in the classroom. They can say, you know, my mom's in the hospital. I don't feel like doing school today. And we know that right away now. So that's been really exciting. And that is something we will be continuing to do once we're permanently in person. Yeah, so now opening up to any questions or comments.
Oh, I'll just keep asking questions because I'm really excited. I'm curious. Really first, before I dive into questions, do you have some students back in the building now, or what is your current reality?
Yes, we do have some students back in the building. And yeah, Dr. E, do you want to talk more about like the statistics on that?
Yeah, sure. Alex, we've got about half of our kids returned for in-person learning. Originally, it was about 60%, and it's parents have kind of pulled back even more so we're down to about 40%, and then we have about 60% that are doing distance learning. And what we've tried to do to really help personalize and try to stay personalized is, instead of having teachers teach the live students and the distance learners at the same time, we've created cohorts of distance learning groups and the live groups that meet the safety guidelines. So the teachers are teaching all live kids at the same time and all distance learning kids at the same time. So we found a way to do that in other schools I know that haven't been able to do that and have this simultaneous teaching going on.
That sounds awful.
And it's not going, that's not going well for anybody. So
I'm curious, Anita, you were talking about how you guys, first of all, every single one of those check-ins and those, like that linear scale is incredible. I love it. But I'm curious, like how, and I guess you're probably already doing that for the students that you have in person. Like, how does that work into, I don't want to say a traditional normal school day, but like whatever normal becomes or is. I think, you know, so many of these things, as you've said, like you've been able to figure out and to do because of the flexibility and because of kind of the reality of distance learning. And so how do you adapt these to, you know, that in-person reality of physically being in the space?
So a lot of it is because our students have Chromebooks in person now. We can actually, like, it just, if teachers buy into it, we can like make it happen the next day. And like with the daily check-in, those are reflective of how each teacher looks. So they see all their teachers' Bitmojis that day. And when in our advisory class, there is that dual learning. So the students in person are also, like, the students in DL are being broadcasted on our Promethean board while the students are in person. And when the teachers start their advisory class, they'll just say, all right, so let's go to the daily check-in, and they'll send the link out so that all the students can answer that daily check-in question. Did that kind of answer? Okay, so
I'm just picturing, you know, like, so are students walking in and like opening their Chromebooks and getting to do that immediately? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's become our reality where, yeah, students come in, first thing to do is open their Chromebooks, and all that teaching is being done on the Chromebook while the teacher is like presenting their slides in person.
Right. That makes total sense.
And one of the things that I really appreciate, I mean, first we happened to get 3 brilliant counselors. I don't know how it happened, but it did. And but one of the things that the grant really allowed us to do is really kind of let them have the kind of power and influence in the teams. I mean, they're just one of the teams. So it isn't like we are trying to attach social emotional curriculum that somebody made up 10 years ago and published 1,000 miles away from us. Our social emotional work is truly embedded and responsive to everything that's going on in the school. And as Anita said, we can do it overnight. We see a need, we find a solution because we have these people who are trained to think this way and watch this way. And they've really brought that to all of the teachers and help teachers to understand their role as teaching children instead of teaching curriculum now. And I'm just so eternally grateful that when all this pandemic and trauma hit, again, we already had these people who were specialists at saying, we can figure out how to respond in the best way to this.
Yeah, we usually have, if we see something on the news, like George Floyd, we had so many students who had questions around that because there are a lot of students who look like George Floyd. You know, it's like representative of their community. So we really had to just throw all the curriculum out the window that day and then bring in just like, hey, let's just have real talk. What are your questions? What's going on? And because we have like a counselor association, our lead counselors already have slides made for that day. And then our other counselors at Olson can come together, make slides, and the teachers hand it off to us, or we collaborate with the teachers so that they are also participating in that social emotional learning. And that's made, I mean, I can't even begin to say like how much I wish I had this when I was growing up. I didn't have a counselor in the building. There was no social emotional learning, especially for me as an Indian person from India. Like no one looked like me, and my white teachers never asked me what it was like to be Indian when 9/11 happened. Like I got called terrorist, and now we have our Asian students here who are being called like racial slurs. We have our Black students who are scared about dying every day, and that has become our reality, which we have to address. And it's made our community closer because our teachers, no matter what their skin color, are not afraid to talk about it.
I have a follow-up question to what Alex asked. You mentioned that your counselors are working with your teachers to provide social emotional learning, and I'm wondering how you've built space in for that collaboration between counselors and teachers.
Well, one of the key things that we've done structurally is ensure that the teachers all have the same prep time, and the counselor joins them. They all have the same scheduled time together each week in professional learning communities. Counselor is part of that as well. So we really were we really made sure the structure that we created of the school day for the adults was going to be able to support the adults doing this work. And I think that's our next topic. And for the last part of this segment is to talk a little bit about what we did with the adults at the school in order to have them embrace my story, my brilliance, and make it happen with our students. So if you want to hit the next slide, Carly, there. Mr. W, I think, are you starting the professional development piece?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And so, yeah, and this was the last piece is what this goes back to the fact that we're a public middle school, and we swim in the same water as every other school in our district. And so we take the teachers who come to us, they're what we work with. And we recognized early on that if we're going to truly change the experience of our children on a moment-to-moment basis, then our teachers have to really raise their competency level around both social emotional learning. The role of emotions in learning really is what that is, and where emotion and cognition come together so that children engage and learn. And also in just this idea of creating an optimal learning environment. What does that actually mean to create an optimal learning environment? And that's really what we focused on with our professional development. And so, Carly, you can roll that. And so from the very beginning of our project, we built in really a 4-year plan or a 3-year plan for this, because we knew it was going to take a long time. Most of professional development that happens, it's a day-long experience or 2-hour-long experience or something, and it does not get into the children's experience. And so we wanted to avoid that, and we wanted to focus on what mattered most and focus on it for a long period of time and truly embed it. And so um, all the adults are receiving the professional development. The counselors are part of this, and so they get to reinforce what the teachers learned, and the teachers get to work with the counselors to make it happen as well. And so some of the things that we talk about and really work to help our teachers bring into the classroom are these really high level things around, we'll talk about self-determination theory, which is a really strong theory of motivation, and it's a theory of needs fulfillment. And what's really amazing and interesting to me is that at least in our part of the neighborhood here, we're really on the forefront of this. More and more and more of what you see in the professional literature is around needs-based and emotions-based, and what's happening in with people as they either learn or don't learn, based on whether the learning is fulfilling their needs. And our teachers have begun to talk in terms of if a curriculum isn't really working for the kids, they can say, you know what, this is totally violating their need for competency right now, and I have to change it so they feel their competency need is fulfilled. And when that's the level of talk and analysis for teachers, it's really an amazing and stimulating place to work. So we work with the self-determination theory and needs fulfillment. We sent all of our teachers to developmental designs through this grant. And developmental designs is responsive classroom for the middle school years. And it again is based on creating an optimal learning environment that fulfills students' needs on a moment-to-moment basis. And the equation is so simple that if you're violating needs, people aren't going to learn, and they're going to have a horrible time. If you're fulfilling needs, people are going to learn, and they're going to have a really wonderful, and there's the joyous time. That's where it comes. And we are at a point now in the work with our developmental designs that we no longer are sending people out to get professional development. For next year, we're planning and providing our own developmental designs, professional development, because our teachers have become proficient with it and really steeped in it. We've done a lot of work with cultural responsive strategies and really, again, cultural sustaining strategies. So really trying to be on the forefront on that. And that's all of these things are so much, I would say they're no-brainers. When you create an environment that people feel respected in, where they feel like they can bring what they already know, their brilliance, their culture, into the space and use it as the launching pad for their learning, they learn and they thrive. And then the last one I talked a little bit about is that the first one on our slide here, which is GIFSI, which is something that we really developed on our own, out of the grant and out of the research and what we saw happening, and also based on this idea that our teachers are what we have to work with. And so we're going to create teachers and really create them that become really, really brilliant around how do I interact with students on a moment-to-moment basis. And so we brought this idea of, when we're interacting with kids, we want to always have that G, that goal setting, that goals and interest. If I see that you have my interest and what you're talking about is interesting to me or part of my goals, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to engage with it. If I don't see that, why would I pay attention? And so we build that in. And then the expressions of high expectations and expressions of high support, that's what we expect our teachers to constantly be telling the kids. This is challenging work. This is not easy, but we can do it. I know you can do it. I expect the best from you. And it's amazing how children live up to that when that's what they're constantly hearing. And then that piece that we always attach to it is the expressions of high support. High expectations without support just lead to frustration. And so we taught our teachers to constantly be giving, we think of it as making readily available everything a child needs to be successful at whatever you're asking them to do. And again, that success builds on success. and then feedback, and as we talked about, celebration. And for some people, the idea of celebrating even the little things is totally foreign. But we're creating a staff that becomes just the norm. We just celebrate things, because if we don't do it intentionally, joy and wonder, they don't just happen spontaneously. We really have to create them, and so that's part of it. And as a part of that celebration piece, we've really built a strong tradition. And I know we're getting to our time here, but we built a strong tradition of having official school celebrations as well. And so that's what the next slide is just an example of how we officially celebrate all of our children and all the wonderful things they're doing and growing in. And that was a really easy transition for us when we went to distance learning. We said we can't let go of celebrations, and so we developed all these really cool virtual celebrations. And when we're having them, when they're going on, the kids just pick right up, and in the chats are just full of these wonderful supportive expressions to their classmates. And so it's really been a great journey.
A couple of the important things that we noticed after the first 2 years prior to the pandemic, we saw a tremendous reduction in our failure rate, a tremendous reduction in behavior incidents. We saw attendance increase, and probably at the heart of all of this happening, we saw a staff retention rate of over 90-some%, which prior to my story, my Brilliance work, was usually around 65%. So just imagine that a third of the teachers turning over every year, and all of a sudden that stops, and you get people working together year after year. And that was really something that had a huge impact. So go to the last slide. So moving forward, priority and budget, counselors, right? Continuing the success of the journal writing, continuing to get more granular with personalizing the curriculum, and always keeping students and their needs fulfillment as a school-wide priority. And we really appreciate the opportunity to speak today. The amazing team. Again, thank you to Education Evolving for inviting us. And we hope you enjoyed our information, and you're welcome to reach out to any of us if you want to have additional conversation.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey, Anita, Steve, Stacy. I really appreciate getting to know, your school and your team through all of this, and this really intentional approach to relationship building and school transformation that you've created. So thank you so much for being here. I believe we have one more session left today and our closing plenary tomorrow. So I hope to see you all there.